Welcome back, friends. Oh my gosh, I have a guest that you guys are going to love. There's so much alignment in the work that we do, the things that we can geek out over, the things that excite us. So, here I have Valerie Rubin on the podcast, and Valerie is the owner of Freedom with Valerie LLC. She helps people heal their anxious attachment, abandonment fears, and feel worthy from the inside out. She utilizes somatic therapy and hypnotherapy to move stuck trauma through the body. So she really just desires for women to be securely attached, to learn how to embody that, and to ultimately trust themselves and the world. And that trickles down into next generation. So, really excited to have her here. Valerie, welcome. How are you?
Hi, thank you so much for having me on, Becky. I'm so excited to be here. I'm honestly just feeling really excited. How are you feeling?
Yeah, I am too, especially knowing what we're going to talk about today. It's been extra on my heart lately. The whole attachment theory and different attachment styles, and I want to dig into it. Some listeners might be completely new to this, and I would love to start with just kind of umbrella, overarching Dummies 101 version. What is attachment theory, and can you tell us the four different types of attachment styles?
Yes, you got it. Absolutely. So attachment theory ultimately is based on we attach to our caregivers, and that really sets the tone for our relationships, for our love life, for our relationship patterns. So I'll just go over the four different attachment styles. So this is the one that a lot of people, it's their goal to be securely attached. So when we're securely attached, usually if we haven't done the work on ourselves, if we're naturally securely attached, your caregivers or your parents were regulated and consistently attuned to you. Attunement just means how you were feeling. They didn't tell you to stop crying, don't do that, you shouldn't feel this way. They made space for your emotional experience. With people who are securely attached or you have that attachment style, you feel safe to be vulnerable and close with people, and you can also tolerate when there's space since you know how to self regulate. You're securely attached, you know how to self soothe because that's what was modeled to you. Or this could be an earned attachment style with the work you've done with therapy, coaching, etc. With securely, if you're securely attached, you're able to handle and respond to problems and ruptures in a healthy way. You're able to repair in your relationship, in your marriage. And your main nervous system state is regulation. So you're able to feel the waves of your emotions and hold space for them. So the next one is what I specialize in. It's called anxious attachment. So parents couldn't consistently attune to you. They were either inconsistent in meeting your needs or were just neglectful in meeting your needs. And then what the child learns is they become hyper vigilant to their parents' needs and have these coping strategies of people pleasing, over giving, trying to fix or change their parent to make sure that the parent will meet their needs. And this survival response is really linked with codependency. You know, codependency I like to define is if you're safe, then I'm safe. And then with someone who's anxiously attached, your sense of safety becomes externalized and causes a deep fear of abandonment, meaning you find safety in others. If your parent or your partner has a bad day, then you're having a bad day. You're feeling unsafe in your body. And their main nervous system state is that fight or flight. Feeling angry, feeling anxious. And then we have fearful avoidant. So, fearful avoidant parents were sometimes the source of danger and sometimes safety. Maybe because your parent was narcissistic, they had a personality disorder, or they were an addict. This unpredictability causes you to want closeness, but also you fear that closeness at the same time because that closeness wasn't safe. So, this is what creates those push pull dynamics. And then this is where chaos registers as love in the brain, and anything stable will feel boring. So if these people go on a date, and this could be with anxiously attached or anxious leaning people as well, because they start to go on a date with someone healthy, that spark isn't there. We can go over that. And then they're like, well, this person's just boring. No, they're probably just a regulated person who's not going to trigger the crap out of you. Um, And then fearful avoidant, their main nervous system state is freeze. And then the last one we'll go over is dismissive avoidant. So caregivers were dismissive, cold, and they were emotionally unavailable to your bids for connection. This child interprets that as rejection, learns to suppress their needs, and become hyper independent for closeness, and asking for help they start to associate that with pain. So it's like no wonder why you're not going to ask for help or support in adulthood if it was always registered as pain as a child. So since no one was there for them when they were in distress, maybe they were anxious, they start to just go into shutdown. So their feelings and needs get numbed out and they dissociate from them. If anyone listening has dated or is married to a dismissive avoidant, you will notice that they will numb out, they will distract themselves, and their main nervous system state is shut down. So that's really the explanation of these four different attachment styles.
That was so good. Thank you. That was an amazing crash course. And I already have so many thoughts swirling as you're talking. One is a question that actually came up in my coaching container this week was a question that I had myself when it comes to attachment theory. And it was, okay, I definitely identify with the anxious attached, quote unquote, codependent. Like, I'm only okay if my husband's okay in my marriage. But when I think to how I was raised, my parents were very attuned to me, very attentive, like good parents. And she was like, how's this possible? And I had the same exact question because I really felt like my emotions were validated. I felt like very attuned to. So yeah, that was the same question I had, but I also know something about my mom. She was still an active alcoholic, and her last drink was when I was 1 year old. And she remembers what got her to quit drinking was yelling at me for quote unquote no reason. She was like, you were a baby, you were just crying. And I lost it on you. And that's when it was her wake up call to stop drinking. So, with attachment theory, what I've heard is that it's established these like attachments for 6 months of life. So that's my theory. I was like, maybe my mom was a completely different person and wasn't attuned to me. Who knows? But what are your thoughts on this?
Yes, that was my exact thinking. It's like, what was her relationship like when you were between those 0 to 6 months? Like, that can really, really, like, that does impact your nervous system and how you attach to people. Like, our brain is literally developing so rapidly in that small window of time. So, and it would make sense that you would feel more hypervigilant or that codependent if your mom would yell at you, and then now she's different. And it's like, oh, that shift in behavior doesn't make sense.
Yeah, interesting. I can also imagine a lot of people who, in particular, are parents listening to this right now, thinking what I'm thinking in this moment, which is when I think about my son and what I was told when he was a newborn, he was my first. I have a little girl too. But with Ollie, I was taught that sleep training with the cry it out method was the best way to get kids to sleep. And it was torture. And it felt, now I can recognize in retrospect, so against everything in my body, but I thought I was doing the right thing. And so I would leave Ollie crying. And it's still hard for me to think about for like an hour at a time sometimes because I thought this is what a good parent does. I'm teaching him to sleep. And now I'm totally noticing anxious attached tendencies. And so, if anyone's like me, I can imagine a lot of parents spiraling like, crap, I can't get back those first 6 months of life. Have I ruined him? Am I signing him up for a lifetime of therapy? What do you have to say to parents who might be thinking this?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And I would say yes, those first 6 months of life are very imperative and important, but also so is the rest of their life. So if you're showing them that you are consistent, you're regulated, you're consistently attuning to your child, that's what matters. They're that will heal their nervous system because they're seeing something different. So just also be patient with yourself. And I read and heard this somewhere that I don't know if this is fully true, but I have heard that with children, what creates a secure attachment is if their parent is there 50% of the time emotionally. So that's what can create a secure attachment. So, and no parent is perfect. We're all going to have moments, we're all going to have our issues. No one can be regulated or fully just feeling calm 24/7. So just normalizing that. And yeah, the cried out method, it's like when we're taught these things from these authority figures or doctors or professionals, it's like, well, of course we're gonna feel that that's best. And so also just like having some patience with yourself as you were also just trying to do the best for your child or children.
Yeah, I love that. And I also really deeply believe the repair is so much more important than the rupture. Like, even
Mm-hmm.
with the example of a broken bone, people break bones
Mm-hmm.
all the time. But if it is, supported and repaired in the right way, that bone ends up becoming stronger than it was before the break. And I think about that with this situation. I've actually talked to my son about it. He's turning 8 soon, but I told him because he would have, especially around bedtime anxiety, separation anxiety. And I was like, buddy, did you know when you were a baby, I was taught this and this is how I, trained you to sleep. And now I wish I could go back and do it different. And so we've actually kind of reenacted, acted out, redoing that season of his life. And one time I asked him and he was down for it. I was like, do you want to pretend you're a baby and we redo this? Because I wish I could do it differently. And he loved it. He actually ate it up and it was like this really healing thing. And what I started doing with his sleep now is I tell him I'll come back in every 10 minutes and check on you. And that's how some of my friends were sleep training their babies. Like they go in every so often. And even though my son is 8, like he has done amazing with this shift where he knows I'm coming back. And the most I've ever had to go back is twice. He's usually knocked out, whereas before he'd be up for hours, like me telling him to go to bed and listen and get back in his room, and him just not knowing how to deal with the anxiety. So I just know the deeper I've gotten into attachment theory too, it's helped me empathize with him because I'm the same way. I'm like, I don't like distance. I like closeness. I feel safer with closeness. And that's definitely the dance that my husband and I have danced for a long time, is that at the beginning I didn't have words for it. I called it chase and run, where I would chase and he would run, and then later learned, oh, okay, like my anxious attachment shows up. I feel really threatened by space or conflict. And then he is the more quote unquote disorganized type where he wants closeness but fears it at the same time. And so for a long time, I was just like, what the fuck do we do with this? And tried so many things for 10 years, talk therapy, couples counseling, books, retreats, all the things. And it wasn't until somatic work that we were actually able to learn safety in our body in those moments. So for me, my work is in stillness. It's in those moments of conflict or stress to not reach toward, but to learn I am safe in my own body. I can self soothe. And that's been huge. And then his work is more, yeah, reaching toward and staying with versus what his impulse has always been, like, oh my gosh, if there's conflict or stress, I need to get out of here ASAP. So I've definitely seen growth, but we fall back into that in times of stress. And recently, I shared in my podcast episode a couple episodes back how it's felt like, yeah, just this relapse. My mom, we put on hospice, and my nervous system with that is going through something I've never gone through in my life. And so, with this big life changing, world turn upside down event, my anxiety has come out again in my relationship. And we've had to work through it. So I'm curious your advice for women like me who have done the work, who may know the things, who may have even tasted massive breakthrough and thought, oh, I thought we fixed this. And here we are sliding back into it again. What advice do you have for couples caught in that dance?
What a great question. I think almost like you answered it earlier, like finding that safety in your body, like learning how to find it in your body in those times of conflict. And also, like, I just want to validate that it's so huge that, like, your mom went into hospice, and I could so see how, like, it's like of course your nervous system is going to go back into those default states of like feeling very anxious, and it would make sense that you would really desire and want that closeness and attention from your partner because it's this huge life altering event happening with your mom. And so I would just say like finding ways in way finding ways that even small ways, like what ways can he be close to me? Maybe it's not an hour that I would like for him to be close to me. Maybe can ask him, would you have the ability to hold me for 30 minutes maybe instead of an hour? Like, and then finding that compromise. But it is really difficult, when we have those parts of us. But as you continue doing the work, continue to find that safety in your body and co-regulation. It's both. That's really
Mm.
the ingredient to healing.
Yeah. I know you talk a lot too in your work about attracting healthy relationships. And I don't know if you've ever experienced this or seen this with clients, but I can get myself into this kind of mind fuck where I know that my anxiety and my need for closeness out of a fear of losing him has been a repellent energy in the past. It has pushed him away. And when I learned how to self soothe, how to feel safe in my body, that was the first invitational door for him to feel safe to move toward me. And so what I've noticed, the mindfuck part about it, is now I can get into these states of like when I notice the anxiety rising, I'm like, oh crap, like I know what this is. I don't want to repel him. And then it can just be this like fear constricting, self sabotaging whirlwind moment. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes. Yes, yes, yes. And this is my first thought. It's like you notice as soon as you said I noticed the anxiety and then it's like crap, fuck. Now I'm propelling him away. But what that does when we're doing that to ourselves, it's creating shame. And shame causes the anxiety to be stuck, right? When we have these emotions, they don't become big because they're just how they are. They become big because we add a layer of shame onto it. Like now I'm repelling him because I'm anxious. It's like what I would suggest is just sitting with that anxiety. Anxiety, I am here for you. I can so see that you're really wanting closeness right now. How can I help my body feel safe in this moment? Giving yourself some self validating affirmations, feeling I'm here with you. Anxiety, I'm here with you. I see you. I acknowledge you. And really holding space for that anxiety.
I love that so much. That's so good. Yeah. I also think like in those moments when we're in that shame spiral and we're just harping on ourselves, especially if it's over our attachment style coming out. We also have to remember it's not always just anxious attachment. Like sometimes it's just genuine relational needs. And I needed a friend to
Mm-hmm.
kind of wake me up out of that. When I was going
Mm-hmm.
through this recently, she was like, your mom is dying. Like you need extra hugs right now. You actually need extra support. And that helped me to dissolve the shame of like, okay, I'm not just anxious attached right now. Like I actually need extra love in this season because it's pretty crazy. Um, but I love what you just invited people to consider trying, which is that integration of different parts of us. And I know something else that you do talk about a lot and help people with is reparenting your inner child, which that can be kind of a cliche buzzword that maybe people have heard of. And if they're like me, just kind of roll their eyes at off the bat, like, oh yeah, reparent inner child work, like feel very wah, wah. But tell us what exactly that is, what it looks
Yes.
like. I actually had found that to be one of the most breakthrough things that I started to do in my healing journey.
Absolutely. And I wanted to share and tie into reparenting your inner child with what you did with your son. So, literally, what you did with your son was so genius. And I'm sure, like, very intuitive as well. You're like, can we just react this out? Like, pretend you're a baby. And especially at that age, their brain is so malleable and adaptable. Like, and then he stopped having anxiety because, and tying this back into inner child work, when you do inner child work, you're soothing that inner child at the trauma that first happened. Maybe that trauma was when you were a baby and your parent had the cry it out method, or your parents got divorced when you were 5, and then you go back to these parts of yourself, these younger parts. Okay, what did you need to share in that moment, and soothing that inner child, because the brain doesn't understand the difference between a real and imagined event. So when you did that for your child, it was like he was healing that original wound as a baby at that age of 8 years old. So, really, that's what we're doing. We're imagining, like, I'll just use an example because I think I'm rambling. So, a lot of the times my clients come with me for their anxiety, and a lot of it's that anxiety when we're distant from our partner. So let's just use the name Stacy, for example, with one of my clients. So she noticed this distance from her partner made her really, really anxious. We went back to the root of where that first started, and she went back to a scene when she was 4 years old, and she was left alone, and she was crying, and no one came to help her. They were busy. They were at a funeral, actually. And so no one noticed that she was crying. And so then she started to have beliefs about herself that my needs don't matter. Distance is unsafe, distance is dangerous. So what we did was we imagined her higher adult self came and enter into this memory when she was 4 years old. And she first connected with her, looked her in the eyes. I'm here for you. You're not alone in this experience, because that's what creates the trauma. It's not necessarily
Mhm.
the trauma itself, it's the beliefs that we have and the feelings, and we're alone in that experience. So now she connected to that younger version of herself, looked her in the eyes. She decided to hold her hand, and she asked, "What do you need to share with me right now?" She asked this 4 year old, "I feel alone. I feel scared. I feel anxious, and no one's coming to help me." And it's like, well, of course, that 4 year old is going to feel anxious when there's distance. So then she asked, "What do you need to hear from me in this moment? That I'm not alone. I have someone who cares about me, that my needs matter." And that higher adult version just repeated what she needed to hear, gave her some hugs, and then we imagined that this 4 year old version of ourselves was coming into her body and integrating into this 42-year-old's body. So that's really an example of what reparenting your inner child looks like.
That's so cool. And I think it's so cool because we like are just getting to know each other, Valerie. We haven't dove deep much into conversation before this podcast, but what you just explained, I actually have a guided visualization doing just that. Like it's visiting your early essence and then your higher, wiser version of you. And so for those listening, I can put that in the show notes so people can just have a guide if you're kind of like, how do I do that myself? To do what Valerie is offering. It's really, really powerful. Also, this is just kind of random, kind of on topic, but reparenting your inner child. Last night, I was putting my daughter to bed and we were playing school, which is something that I used to do. I used to love playing school when I was little. And she was the teacher, and I was waiting for her to get my homework assignment ready. And I was just kind of scribbling my old signature with my maiden name just for fun. And I noticed it brought back like so much. It was like this powerful experience to write the signature of Rebecca Glennie. That was my last name before I got married. Now it's Aste. And it just would flood back these images of my dad and my old house and just like all the times when I would write that signature so many times. And it felt nostalgic and powerful. And then playing school with my daughter, thinking of all the times I did that as a kid. So, just curious, like, what are some other ways we can get in touch with or integrate or whatever you'd call it with our essence of who we were when we were kids? Also, with the caveat of so many people not remembering their childhood because it was so traumatic. I don't know if you find that in your work, but I have a lot of clients that were like, it's all blank, like zero memories. They can feel shame about that. That was a lot to throw you, but what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I'll first start with the ways to connect back with your essence, and then going into like how to connect with yourself, even if you don't remember your childhood, and dissolving some of that shame around that. So, ways to connect with your essence is, what are some things that brought you joy as a child. And if nothing brought you joy as a child and you had that really traumatic childhood, think about what are some ways that you feel the most joyful. Like for me, there are two things. Like as a child, I did dance when I was 3. Like I was in these classes and it was so fun. And recently, like around 6 months ago, I went through a breakup and I decided to join a dance team. And it was one of the most healing things that could have happened for me. And so I joined a second dance team. And then soon I'm going to be starting solo work of doing dance performances on my own. So it really just connects me with that younger part of me who just loved to move and be in her body. And it just like to me makes so much sense that I'm a somatic coach now, but it's like it's the most beautiful thing for me. So that's one. It's also helping me to feel safe and being seen, because my dance instructor is very kind, very nice, doesn't like nitpick at your mistakes. And then like the community around me in the dance team, like it's very, very healing, helps me to feel safe being seen, helps me to connect with my inner child's essence. So that's one. And the second way that I connect to my inner child is I will just go to a Barnes and Noble every single week and I will carve out that time for myself and I will journal to this younger version of me, what are you feeling right now? What sensations are coming up for you? What emotions are coming up? Holding space for that. What do you need to hear in this moment? Right? With anxious attachment, if you're more anxious leaning, I like to call it, then we are starving for that validation. We didn't get that attention, that connection. So when we are journaling or doing these different things, this is healing that younger version of ourselves who didn't feel heard, who felt lonely, who felt alone. And so I do journaling and then I color. So I'll journal, get those emotions out, and then I'll color in my mindfulness coloring book. I let her scribble, go out of the lines, and it's just like so fun. And I notice abandonment fears are dissolved. And like when I don't connect to myself and when I'm not doing those practices, I will feel more of that abandonment wound coming up for me just in general because I'm not connecting with myself. So, really, ways to connect with your essence are what are things that you love to do when you were a child, or what are things that naturally bring you joy today?
I love that
I'll
so much.
pause there.
So powerful. Yeah. And you said anxious leaning. That has me curious because I feel like with any label, I really am leery of labels and I kind of hate them. And
Mm-hmm.
so with the Enneagram or human design
Mm-hmm.
or, any kind of acronym we throw on our identity, I think it can be really limiting. And so I like that you said anxious leaning. And I'm curious what paradigm can you offer people to kind of adopt if they're learning about if they're learning about attachment theory without letting it be this label that they limit themselves by?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I'm the same way. I have a clinical background. Like, I got my degree in psychology, I was a case manager. So it was all about insurance, labels, and I just didn't resonate because I always see the whole person. Like, it's not who you are. So I also like to say anxious leaning because attachment is like a spectrum. Like, we might have some anxious attachment parts, but we also can have secure parts or avoidant parts. And so it's like maybe you're more anxious leaning. Like I really feel like that can dissolve some of the shame around that. And these like your attachment style are just symptoms. Like they're just these parts of you that are wanting love and to be integrated. It's showing you where your unmet needs are.
Yeah. And then would you say people can change attachment styles based on who they're around?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. Absolutely. That's the whole second part of like I think that's a whole second part of the healing process and why community is so important, especially if you're more avoidant leaning or even anxious leaning. It can feel hard to open up and be vulnerable, but when you're with those securely attached people or safer people, then you learn disconfirming experiences, right? We have those traumatic experiences that tell us we're not enough, we're unlovable, our needs are too much, we don't matter. And then disconfirming experiences are experiences that are showing you the opposite, that it's safe to open my heart. It's safe to love again. It's safe to be vulnerable with people because other people hold me in my grief, in my emotions, in my vulnerabilities and they don't shame these parts of myself, that's equally as healing. And why community is so important, as you know, as I believe you've done group programs as well, like it's so healing. And like also why group programs are so healing as well is other people have similar struggles, and we're almost just removing the layer of I'm broken, there's something wrong with me, I'm different, when you're having that group dynamic. And I learned that in group coaching or group therapy, why it's also so powerful is all the people are like replicating your family dynamic and healing it, because it's just showing you that disconfirming experiences. And then we can get into the shame around not knowing your childhood.
Yeah, I've never thought about that. That group containers can be powerful because there's so many different personalities and energies and attachment styles, exactly like whatever family we grew up in. I've always found the group work to be, I tell my clients, the magic ingredient of their healing journey, because there is so much shame that can dissolve when you're fully seen, radically accepted, telling people your deepest, darkest shame triggers, and they're like not even batting an eye. They're just nodding and being like, me too. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I've always been a fan of group work, but never thought about it in that context. And it's not for everyone. Some people, right, are just in a state where being in a group is more triggering than helpful at the time, and one on one can be really supportive. But I just love everything that you've brought. And really, as we land this plane, what I hear you saying is, yeah, we're not limited or fixed or stuck with this first 6 months of life, whatever was handed to us, that we're malleable and expansive, and we can actually fluctuate between many different types of relating depending on who we're around. And it's just helpful to have language and awareness, but beyond that intellectual language and awareness, the somatic piece is really what brings it full circle and helps women expand their maybe percentage of how much they're showing up secure in relationships. And I just appreciate your viewpoint so much, and how much shame you're dissolved, for even those listening. I loved the fact that you put out today, where it's only 50% of the time as a, caregiver, that you need to actually be present and attuned. I feel like I heard so many moms just sigh a sigh of relief, like, oh, okay, I can like get half the time. None of us are expected to be perfect. But yeah, so much good stuff in this episode. Valerie, is there any last pieces of wisdom or practical steps that you would want to leave listeners with who are just really intrigued by this?
Yes, yes. Just know that you aren't stuck in this. Like Becky said, it's more about the repair, and that somatic piece is the most important piece, because these attachments form because we don't feel safe in our body. So as we build that capacity to feel safe in our body, to be safe with love, to feel safe with distance, then and we meet those needs, we naturally become more secure. So your attachment style is not fixed. It will naturally shift as you do this work. And just one last question, like, did you want me to share about the childhood piece? About like forgetting your
Yeah,
childhood?
please.
Okay, perfect. So to just dissolve some of the shame around it, like we might have all of our childhood missing, or different parts from our memory are missing, and know that your brain wouldn't keep anything from you that you weren't ready to look at. So as you also do this work and start to feel safer in your body, I've had many clients who remember nothing about their childhood, and then as we work together, I first start by working with the nervous system, teaching them how to move out of states of fight, flight, freeze, and fawn, so that they can actually feel safer in their body, be connected to their body. And that's really the most important part before doing processing work. If you haven't done that type of trauma work or somatic work before. So I do that with clients. And as they start to do that, and as they start to work with me, as they feel safer in their body, memories naturally start to come up, and many feelings can be associated with that. But just know that as you work through it, you will start to get memories back as you feel safer in your body, and your brain is literally just trying to protect you, because your nervous system knows much more than what you capable of than your logical mind. Like just these frustrations of why don't I remember, but it's like it makes sense that you didn't remember. And as you do the healing, you will with the right support,
I
just
love
going
that.
slowly.
Yeah, so good, Valerie. You got so much good wisdom and experience. And where can people find you if they want to follow you or learn more?
Yes, thank you so much, Becky. So people can find me on Instagram at Heal with Val, HEAL with VAL on Instagram. Um, or they could find me on Facebook at Valerie Rubin. Those are top two, but I'm mostly on Instagram, or I have my own podcast that I invited Becky to be a part of called the Anxiety Recovery Podcast by Valerie Rubin. We talk more about anxiety, anxious attachment, healing dynamics, all of that fun stuff. So those are some ways you can find me.
Awesome, Valerie. We'll make sure it's all in the show notes. And thank you for your time today. I really loved this conversation.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Becky.